welcome back, guys. Last week we looked at the kick drum. This week we are looking at the snare drum. Gonna take a listen to it and see how everything sounds, all the processing on. And here's just the drums. And let's go ahead and listen to the snare by itself. Okay, let's take the processing off. Back on. Snare without any processing. Alright, so pretty big difference actually. This snare, the only problem I had with the snare that I didn't like off the bat was that it was recorded with reverb on it, or it was sent to me with reverb on it. So the sucky thing about that is if you listen to it, even without processing, there is a trail on it. I don't like that reverb at all. Does not fit with the song, but that is actually a realistic scenario. A lot of times I'll get tracks, files, and they aren't ideal per se because everyone's recording techniques are different. And you know, not everyone saves files or keeps track of them like they should. No biggie. So our job is to make the best of what we have. So thankfully I was able to overcome it, but let's go ahead and take a listen to what I did. So first off, like I love my trusty dusty tube tech. What I did with the tube tech is EQ and compression. So let's go ahead and listen to this. So we'll take out the EQ. This is before compression. With compression. So if you can hear that, hopefully listening on good monitors or headphones, I wanted to add punch to the snare. The snare sounds like the raw tone is fine, but I wanted to add punch. And how we add the punch is we want kind of a medium attack. That way the initial transient can come through. And then I wanted the rest of the snare to be held down, and that gives us the feeling of punch. So let's take a listen. My ratio on this was 5. My ratio was 5-1. So pretty significant gain reduction, and you can see that in the meter. So if you can tell, there's like a certain smack that comes from the compressor. So without compression, and then here's the smack. And I actually parallel compress this one. So something really important, if you look at this knob right here, if I have it all the way wet, you hear nothing but the compression. You hear that smack. And then here's without compression. So what you're hearing is the initial transient come through and everything else shutting down after that. So I want to put this in the middle. Basically, you're blending in the compressed signal and the non-compressed signal. So that's how I was able to get a really nice attack on the snare, while also maintaining the meat of the snare. After that, I wanted to make the attack more present. So last week we talked about the kick drum, how you feel the kick drum on the bottom and you hear it at the top. It's kind of the same with the snare. So let's take a listen with the EQ. So if you listen, the EQ adds a lot of presence to that snap. Right, so now we have punch, we have snap, and then this right here, I did some mid-range dip. That was to try to counteract the reverb a little bit and to make more space for the rest of the drums when they blend it together. But let's take off the compression, listen to just the EQ. Okay, so what I did here is the interesting thing about these two tech, this is based off of Pultec EQ, but the cool thing about these is you can boost and attenuate at the same time, and it just has a weird effect. Hard to explain, but let's see if we can take a listen. With this style of EQ, we can boost the frequency and attenuate at the same time. So I took out 100 hertz, but also put in 100 hertz. Now what's interesting is that it has an effect that you can't get if it was canceled out normally. Like you would think if I boosted by 5 and attenuate by 5, I should get no effect, right? But if you can tell, it's actually thicker with them on together. So what I did was I attenuated the 100 hertz, boosted 100 hertz, and it takes out the mud, but still gives me some warmth at the bottom. You see that? So I got some low end warmth, and then I went ahead and boosted 8K to get the snap. Bypassed. Okay, and then down here, all I did was I went ahead and attenuated about 300 hertz just to make room, because I said the reverb was pretty muddy and it takes up space when it comes to blending with the rest of the instruments. And when you have all that together, we're going to bypass it. And then process. That snare snapping a lot better. So let's listen all together with the drums, and I'll bypass so you can hear it in context. So much better. That presence on the high end and the compression smack, the parallel, it's just huge. Makes such a big difference. That's what gives you that hard rock smack. Now this right here, I did some more EQ. Let's take a listen to this. This was when you see crazy EQ curves like this, a lot of times it's either cleanup or it's just what you need to get the sound right. So a quick listen to this on and off. Now this right here was the night and day EQ. This is what I used to clean up all that low end, because when you add reverb to a signal, a lot of times it's really mid-range heavy. So I wanted to take all that out, and I wanted to boost 155 hertz because that's where the snare fundamental is. So that's a good way of thinking about the fundamental is like every snare has a pitch, a fundamental pitch, and that's what I'm talking about. So if you listen to it, that ooh, what you're hearing is that 155, right? So if we take that out, the snare's kind of flat, but the fundamental frequency is here. So let's turn this up. You hear that? It's an actual pitch. So that's what I was boosting, and that's where you get the tone of the snare from. Let's put that back, 3.25. And then right here, I was taking out all the mud. So bypass, you can hear that reverb. Take it out. And now we've got our fundament. Now we got a much cleaner sounding snare. So that's how I worked around the reverb. Get used to working around shortcomings like that. Don't let it stop you from getting a great sounding final mix. So let's take a listen now with the snare together with all the drums, with all the processing. Really nice and clean. You hear how dirty that is? Night and day. And so once I did that, the last step is our reverb processing. I went ahead, I have a snare verb and a tail. So I usually use 2 reverbs. And the reason why I do that is my first reverb is actually for the room space. And then my second reverb is for the tail, right? So we'll take a listen to why I do that. So we've got the fundamental snare. This one you can't hear as much just because I'm subtle with the reverb and there was already reverb on the drum track. But this is just, it gives the snare a little bit of width. And the second one is the actual tail. So you can hear that. Okay, and here's the room. So no reverb with reverb. Makes it wider, makes it fatter, and then because of that reverb placement, it also makes it fit with the rest of the drum. So check this out. If I take it off, the snare sounds kind of flat and dry. And that reverb tail really brings out that fundamental snare frequency, right? So the fundamental I talked about, that reverb really makes that shine. So check this out. So the snare is very centered, very direct. Now watch me add this reverb tail. So that's how we get that fundamental even more ringing out. So all together. No processing. With processing. Night and day. So this right here is a really good example of how much you can actually alter a sound source for better or for worse. Hopefully that gave you guys some clue on just how to EQ a snare. And this is just one way. I'm going to be doing other tutorials later as well, so we can get into different types of sounds, because you don't want to make every snare the same way. It all depends on what kind of sound you're going for. With more of this rock, I want a nice, heavy, powerful snare with a lot of smack and a great fundamental frequency, so we can get a good punch in the face and a good punch in the gut.
Do it now, do it now. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. Oh, this is the praise make a dead man walk again.
Okay, so that wraps it up for today's tutorial. Hope you guys learned something. Feel free to comment and like, and let me know if there's any other subjects or questions you guys have. All right, see you guys next time, and we'll be going over the overheads and the tones.